Okay, good morning. We are basically going into our first myth of individual opportunity article. It is called Class in America 2009 by Gregory Mantsios. It appears on page 281 to 297 of Rereading America, and you should be finished reading with it by tomorrow, October 9th, and we'll continue studying it over the weekend. But this is a very controversial article. It's also a scholarly article, but I think you won't find it super difficult to read. It's very powerful and very controversial article. But Gregory Mantsios basically contends that let's take a look first, though. 2009, let's take a look at the title. So basically, in 2009, there was basically, as you recall, there was a huge economic downturn or recession in America. And a big part of that was caused by the housing crisis, the housing industry crisis, where a lot of banks and mortgage lenders are writing very questionable loans to homeowners, to future homeowners who could not eventually afford those homes or could not afford those terms and conditions, and there's a lot of controversy there because they feel that the lenders misled them, right? So basically, there was a huge economic downturn and recession, so it was very controversial. A lot of people were very upset. A lot of people lost a lot of their retirement income and their houses and so forth. So it's very controversial. So that article was very timely for that time because there was a lot of upsetness or people being very upset about the inequality in America or the class inequality in America. And think about that. Even though it's 2009, we're basically almost 20 years later in 2020. Does that still hold true? Is there some still issues with social class in America? So let's take a look at that. What Gregory Mantsios is saying, it is a scholarly article, but I think you'll find it very easy or very controversial because it gives a lot of statistics and a lot of start facts, and you'll probably be able to relate it to your life and society about that. Very easy to understand. It could be very upsetting, very controversial, but he's basically assuming that despite what a lot of Americans say about social class, where we're like a class of society, he thinks that basically the class we were born in, Gregory Mantsios is saying the class, he's basically asserting the class we were born in, the social class we were born in, whether we're, a lower working class, middle class, upper class, very upper class. The class we were born in is most likely the class that you'll end up in by the end of your life. So that's very controversial. So basically, if you're born poor, it's going to be very difficult for you to get out of that. Of course, there's definitely exceptions, but he's saying in most cases, statistically, if you're born if you're born in a certain station of life, most likely you'll end up, despite your best efforts, maybe to do better than your parents. Your parents probably want you to do better or be proud of you by surpassing them. You'll still end up maybe approximately in the same station of life as your parents or the part of life you're born in. So Gregory Mantsios, he makes that assertion is very controversial because, again, we're getting back to the myth of individual opportunity, right? Like we as individuals, right, according to the American dream or the myth of individual opportunity, we as individuals have that power within ourselves to basically move upward as much as we want upward mobility as long as we work hard, right? But he's saying that these are wider forces here. Even though we all have great intentions, it doesn't really turn out to be true because there's a lot of wider forces in society, such as race, social class, economics, and so forth. So he basically provides that contention. He gives a lot of myths about America, where some of the myths are, we're essentially a classless society where we all look at each other as equals. But again, the controversy comes in because are we really a classless society? Another myth he gives is that we're all Americans are basically middle class and people basically there's actually a huge middle class in America, but Gregory Mantsios in reality says that, hey, there's really not a big middle class. There's really a lot of poor people in America, and there's a lot of very few rich people who own more money than just like a whole bunch of poor people. It's all their combined income will be much less than a few rich people. So he's basically giving a lot of myths about America. A lot of controversial myths that kind of harken back to the myth of individual opportunity about us being an equal society. We all have an equal chance to succeed. And then he gives a lot of statistics, and I'll be asking you for your opinions on any of the statistics that jump out at you, whether you really agree with the stat or you found it shocking or you disagree with the statistic and you want to see where Mantsios got his information from. But I'm sure Mantsios basically, as a scholarly article, he basically supports his data. So again, he's basically, when he makes an argument, he's not just throwing out opinions, he's actually giving his sources. But Mantsios is basically giving his opinion, backing it with statistics, and You have a right to question those stats or even go back to where he got those stats. But I'm sure if you talk to him personally, he'll be able to show you where he got all that information. And he'll probably still say even 10 years later, right, it's still true in society, right? Even though it's 10 years later, maybe the numbers have changed, but the basic fundamental issue of the class you were born in is the class you're going to end up in is still true, right? So he basically gives a lot of startling facts, statistics, things you can critically look at. And also as part of his argument to basically dispel those myths or basically to cut down those myths, saying they're not really true, he gives a hypothetical portrait of three types of people. So we have basically Harold Browning, who's a very rich person. He's very born in wealth. He owns horses. He has all the greatest tutors. He's very rich, right? He's very high level manager or high level person in his firm. Then we have Bob Farrell, who's basically a working and middle class type person who's a manager, assistant sales manager at his firm. But I still think he just got through community college and he's still trying to get his degree. He's a adult, yet he's still trying to get his 4-year college degree and wants to become an electrical engineer one day, right? So he owns a house too, so he has a lot of success. But we have a middle class person, Bob Farrell, and then finally we have the most controversial person, Cheryl Mitchell, who has like a triple whammy on her. Number one, she's a woman. So again, does the equal opportunity myth, individual opportunity myth apply to women as equally as men? She's a minority, she is black, and she's also very poor, right? So she has also a triple whammy against her, right? So she's presently a nurse's aide. She lives with her mother. She has children. She takes care of her mother, but like what's going to happen to Cheryl Miller? She has a triple whammy on her, and yet she's still struggling as a nurse's aide to get through life. Is it really fair for Cheryl? Maybe she even works harder than Harold. Harold's riding his horses, and then maybe Cheryl Browning is basically working really hard as a nurse's aide. But is it really fair there, right? Does Cheryl Mitchell, does she deserve more in life? So basically, after the myths, he basically, after he gets his stats in the hypothetical portrait of 3 people, which is very controversial, and maybe you can link yourself. Do you know people? Is it really fair for it? Is that really a good, effective way of arguing? Where he gives a hypothetical person, right? 3 hypothetical people in 3 social classes. Is that really a great way of arguing, right? And can you relate yourself to any of those people, right? What do you think about Harold Browning, right? What should Harold Browning do? Is he really sensitive to the needs of the poor people? Should he be doing more? How about the middle class person? What suggestions do you have for Bob Farrell to get ahead, right? Even though he has a lot of struggles, right? He's achieved some of his hopes, he achieved some of his dreams, but he's still looking for others. And how about Cheryl Mitchell? What advice would you give to someone like Cheryl Mitchell too? Okay. So let's after that. So basically, Mantsios, after giving the myths, the stats, and hypothetical people, he basically provides realities of America, where basically, not unsurprisingly, there's actually a very few rich people who own most of the money in America, and there's a huge economic disparity, and a lot of it's unfair. It could be due to racism, issues of economic or social class. So a lot of it's not really fair that he believes. So the reality of America is actually we're not really getting richer. There's actually very few rich people who are having most of the money. And are the rich people, are they really doing the best with their money? Mantsios asked, right? Is it really fair for them to keep their money, right? Should they redistribute it, right? So eventually in his last paragraph, he gets a really radical argument, right? That we need to do more as a society, right? The rich people there needs to be a radical redistribution of wealth and power in the U.S., right? And how does that manifest itself personally, right? Are the rich people really going to be sending money to bank out poor people, right? And as a rich person, what would you say if you're rich, right? Are you going to be saying, should someone force you to send money to someone else, right? Like it's your hard-earned money, right? And you could see maybe some friends you have, right? Maybe they're not as hardworking as you, right? Even though there's wider economic issues. Maybe your friend personally, and maybe people who are not hardworking, right? Like they didn't do their homework, they didn't study, right? They actually struggled, and the result is that maybe they applied for a few jobs and didn't get their dream job because maybe in school they struggled a little bit, right? They had a B- in school, right? Where maybe they should have got an A in school, right? Or they didn't go to the best school that they could have had, right? So basically, what do you think about that radical redistribution of wealth and power that Mantsios proposes, a radical redistribution of society? Conceptually, what do you think about it? And also practically, right? How can we practically redistribute wealth? Maybe tax the rich, or basically in general, right? And this has been argued for ages too. This is nothing new. Should we actually tax the rich more, or actually have more social programs for working class people? or poorer people to get ahead? What should we do in society, right? How does that manifest itself controversially? And also apply yourself to that issue of social class in America. Uh, and again, with areas of synthesis, right? You also want to think about how you yourself relate to the social class in America. I personally, and then again, I'm going to ask you about your turn too, right? What do you think? I personally too can relate to Bob Farrell, where hey, I may have even when I talked about in the previous lecture, I may have gotten to a point where I was managing. I've gotten college degrees, but however, there's still a struggle, right? Like basically the job. While I was working an office job, I was trying to get my master's degree in English. So it wasn't an ideal situation where I just got a bachelor's degree and then suddenly I just went to graduate school and didn't have to work or anything, or basically had the money given to me in a scholarship. Or for example, I basically had to use my own money to pay for my master's degree and working many years, right? Going to school part time, like Saturday or weekends or nighttime, right? So basically, I had to spend a lot of time. Was that really ideal? Like if someone is going to school part time for many years, it's not really ideal, and that could affect me in the future too, right? Because it delays me getting a job in the future, and also affects my future prospects. The time angle too, like there's lost income there too as you're going through school, spending that tuition, and yet you still don't have that dream job that you had because you're still in school part time, right? As opposed to someone who's going to school full time and quickly gets their degree and then suddenly gets into their dream job, right? Is there does that reflect the reality of what Mantsios is saying, right? That maybe that person had that advantage of being in this higher social class where her parents were richer, right? And they actually paid for her education. She was able to get a higher level job, or he was able to get a higher level job too because his parents paid for him. So think a little bit about that. It's very controversial. So I gave my view of how I'm personally struggling too with the issue of social class. Because again, it's kind of hard to tie yourself conceptually to those wider views, right? And then people get mad too. They say, why are you playing the race card? Why are you playing the social card? Why don't you just work harder, right? So there's always that conflict too, right? And people have their good reason. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, right? Again, like critical thinking. You let people give their different issues, think about what they have to say, argue, talk about it, right? Maybe you'll come to a compromise, but again, you want to be open-minded and let them hear their issues because people do have valid concerns about individuals who don't work hard, right? It's not to just blame economics or social class, right? Is that really the right way to go? But Mantsios throws his opinion in there, and I want you to think about how it relates to yourself. And again, don't be afraid to give a different view, right? Like you could say, hey, I may have been, my parents and I may have been a lower class, but however, through my constant education where I'm getting A's in all my classes and I'm going to be getting into like a higher university like UC Berkeley or one of the UC Berkeley systems in the future, I'm actually going to be progressing above that. You can give your view too of how it affects you. Maybe you have a more positive view of that myth. So until then, I'll talk to you later. Okay, bye.